His collections, The Stone Thrower and the Instruction Manual for Swallowing, are published in the UK by Comma Press, and you can get yourself a copy of both of those over on the merch table behind the pillar. So please welcome Adam Marek. Thank you for coming.
Hey there. Thanks for having me over. Hi. So I write short stories that have a blend of the fantastic and the real in them. So I write a lot of stories about the home, about family life, but always with elements of strange stuff going on, zombies or stuff, lots of science fiction things blended into everyday life. And the whole of this collection, my second collection, The Stone Thrower, are all stories about caring for a particularly vulnerable child, but taken from lots of obscure angles involving fantastical, surreal things. I'm going to read a story called Tamagotchi. Any of you guys have Tamagotchis?
Yeah.
Some, yeah. Do you remember Tamagotchi?
Yeah.
Does anyone know what a Tamagotchi is?
Yeah.
Does anyone not know what a Tamagotchi is? Okay, excellent, that's a good start. Right. Probably put a bookmark in for every story, as it doesn't really help you find it, does it? Okay, it's called Tamagotchi. My son's Tamagotchi had AIDS. The virtual pet was rendered on a little LCD screen with no more than 30 pixels, but the sickness was obvious. It was thinner than it had been. Some of its pixels were faded, and the pupils of its huge eyes were smaller, giving it an empty stare. I had bought the Tamagotchi, named Mimu, for Luke just a couple of weeks ago. He had really wanted a kitten, but Gabby did not want a cat in the house. A cat will bring in dead birds and toxoplasmosis, she said, her fingers spread protectively over her bulging stomach. A Tamagotchi had seemed like the perfect compromise, something for Luke to empathise with and to look after, to teach him the rudiments of pet care for a time after the baby had been born. Empathy is one of the things that the book said Luke would struggle with. He would have difficulty reading facial expressions. The Tamagotchi had only 3 different faces, so it would be good practice for him. Together, Luke and I watched Mimu curled in the corner of its screen. Sometimes Mimu would get up, limp to the opposite corner and produce a pile of something. I don't know what this something was, or which orifice it came from. The resolution was not good enough to tell. I read the instruction manual that came with Mimu. Its needs were simple: food, water, sleep, play. Mimu was supposed to give signals when it required one of these things. Luke's job as Mimu's carer was to press the appropriate button at the appropriate time. The manual said that overfeeding, underfeeding, lack of exercise and unhappiness could all make a Tamagotchi sick. A little black skull and crossbones should appear on the screen when this happens, and by pressing button A twice, then B, one could administer medicine. I checked Mimu's screen again, and there was no skull and crossbones. The instructions said that if the Tamagotchi dies, you have to stick a pencil into the hole in its back to reset it. A new creature would then be born. When Luke had finally gone to sleep and could not see me molesting his virtual pet, I found the hole in Mimu's back and jabbed a sharpened pencil into it. But when I turned it back over, Mimu was still there, as sick as ever. I jabbed a few more times and tried it with a pin too in case I wasn't getting in deep enough, but it wouldn't reset. I wondered what happened if Mimu died, now that its reset button didn't work. Was there a malfunction that had robbed Luke's Tamagotchi of its immortality? Did it have just one shot at life? I guess that made it a lot more special, and in a small way, it made me more determined to find a cure for Mimu. I plugged Mimu into my PC, a new feature in this generation of Tamagotchis. I hoped that some kind of diagnostics wizard would pop up and sort it out. A Tamagotchi screen blinked into life on my PC. There were many big-eyed mutant creatures jiggling for attention, including another Mimu, looking like its picture on the box, before it got sick. One of the options on the screen was sync your Tamagotchi. When I did this, Mimu's limited world of square grey pixels was transformed into a full-colour, three-dimensional animation on my screen. The blank room in which it lived was revealed as a conservatory filled with impossible plants growing under the pale pink Tamagotchi sun. And in the middle of this world, lying on the carpet, was Mimu. It looked awful. In this fully realised version of the Tamagotchi's room, Mimu was a shriveled thing. The skin on its feet was dry and peeling. Its eyes, once bright white with crisp highlights, were yellow and unreflective. There were scabs around the base of its nose. I wondered what kind of demented mind would create a child's toy that was capable of reaching such abject deterioration. I clicked through every button until I found a medical kit. From this, you could drag and drop pills onto the Tamagotchi. I guess Mimu was supposed to eat or absorb these, but they just hovered in front of it, as if Mimu was refusing to take its medicine. I sent Mimu's makers a sarcastic email describing its condition and asking what needed to be done to restore its health. A week later, I had received no reply, and Mimu was getting even worse. There were pale grey dots appearing on it. When I synced Mimu to my computer, these dots were revealed as deep red sores. I came home from work one day to find Luke had a friend over for a play date. The friend was called Becky, and she had a Tamagotchi too. Gabby was trying to organise at least one play date a week to help Luke socialise. Becky's Tamagotchi gave me an idea. This generation of Tamagotchis had the ability to connect to other Tamagotchis. By getting your Tamagotchi within a metre of a friend's, your virtual pets could play games or dance together. Maybe if I connected the two Tamagotchis, the medicine button in Becky's would cure Mimu. At first, Luke violently resisted giving Mimu to me, despite me saying I only wanted to help it. But when I bribed Luke and Becky with chocolate biscuits and a packet of crisps, they agreed to hand them over. I had trouble getting the Tamagotchis to find each other. Maybe Mimu's Bluetooth connection had been compromised by the virus. Eventually though, when I put their connectors right next to each other, they made a synchronous pinging sound, and both characters appeared on both screens. Mimu looked sick on Becky's screen too. I pressed A twice and then B to administer medicine. Nothing happened. I tried again, but the Tamagotchis just stood there, one healthy, one sick, doing nothing. Luke and Becky came back, their fingers oily and their faces brown with chocolate. I was about to disconnect their Tamagotchis from each other, but when they saw that they had each other's characters on their screens, they got excited and sat at the kitchen table to play together. Later, when it was almost time for Becky's mum to pick her up, Becky handed me her Tamagotchi and said, "Can you fix Weeby?" Becky's pink Tamagotchi was already presenting the first symptoms of Mimu's disease, the thinning and greying of features, the stoop, the lethargy. I heard Becky's mum pull up in the car as I began to press the medicine buttons, knowing already that they would not work. "It just needs some rest," I said. "Leave it alone until tomorrow and it should be okay." Luke had been invited to a birthday party. Usually Gabby would take Luke to parties, but she was feeling rough. She was having a particularly unpleasant first trimester this time. So she persuaded me to go, even though I hate kids' parties. I noticed that lots of other kids at the party had Tamagotchis fastened to the belt loops of their skirts and trousers. The kids would stop every few minutes during their games to lift up their Tamagotchis and check they were okay, occasionally pressing a button to satisfy one of their needs. "These Tamagotchis are insane, aren't they?" I remarked to another dad who was standing at the edge of the garden with his arms folded across his chest. "Here," he smiled. "My kid's one got sick," I said. "One of his arms fell off this morning, can you believe that?" The dad turned to me, his face suddenly serious. "You're not Luke's dad, are you?" he said. "I am," I said. "I had to buy a new Tamagotchi thanks to you." I frowned and smirked, thinking that he couldn't be serious, but my expression seemed to piss him off. "You had Becky Willis over at your house, didn't you? Her pet got Matty's pet sick because she sits next to me in class. My boy's pet died. I've half a mind to charge you for the new one." I stared right into his eyes, looking for an indication that he was joking, but there was none. "I don't know what to say," I said, and truly, I didn't. I thought he was crazy, especially the way he referred to the Tamagotchis as pets, like they were real pets. Not just 30 pixels on an LCD screen with only a little more functionality than my alarm clock. Maybe there was something else wrong with yours. Luke's didn't die. The other dad shook his head and blew out, and then turned sideways to look at me, making a crease in his fat neck. You didn't bring it here, did you? He said. Well, Luke takes it everywhere with him, I said. Jesus, he said. And then he literally ran across the game of Twister that some of the kids were playing to grab his son's Tamagotchi and check that it was okay. He had an argument with his son as he detached it from the boy's belt loop, saying he was going to put it into the car for safety. They were making so much noise that the mother of the kid having the birthday came over to calm them. The dad leaned in close to her to whisper, and she looked at the ground while he spoke, then up at me, then at Luke. She headed across the garden towards me. Hi there, we've not met before, she said, offering her hand with a pretty smile. I'm Lillian, Jake's mom. We shook hands and I said that it was nice to meet her. We're just about to play Pass the Parcel, she said. All right. Yes, and I'm concerned about the other children catching... She opened her mouth, showing that her teeth were clenched together, and she nodded, hoping that I understood, that she wouldn't need to suffer the embarrassment of spelling it out. It's just a toy, I said. Still, I'd prefer you make it sound like, if you wouldn't mind. I shook my head at the lunacy of the situation, but agreed to take care of it. When I told Luke I had to take Mimu away for a minute, he went apeshit. He stamped and he made his hand into the shape of a claw and yelled, Sky Badger! When Luke does Sky Badger, anyone in a 2-meter radius gets hurt. Sky Badger is vicious. His sharp fingernails rake forearms. He goes for the eyes. Okay, I said, backing away and putting my hands up defensively. You can keep hold of me, but I'll have to take you home then. Luke screwed up his nose and frowned so deeply that I could barely see his dark eyes. You'll miss out on the birthday cake, I added. Luke relaxed his talons and handed Mimu back to me, making a growl as he did so. Mimu was hot, and I wondered whether it was from Luke's sweaty hands or if the Tamagotchi had a fever. I held Luke's hand and took him over to where the Pass the Parcel ring was being straightened out by some of the mums, stashing Mimu out of sight in my pocket. I sat Luke down and explained to him what would happen and what he was expected to do. A skinny kid with 2 front teeth missing looked at me and Luke, wondering what our deal was. I had to wait until Monday to check my emails at work. There was nothing from the makers of Tamagotchi. At lunch, while I splashed bolognese sauce over my keyboard, I googled Tamagotchi along with every synonym for virus. I could find nothing other than the standard instructions to give it medicine when the skull and crossbones appeared. Halfway through the afternoon, while I was in my penultimate meeting of the day, a tannoy announcement asked me to call reception. When a tannoy goes out, everyone knows it's an emergency, and when it's for me, everyone knows it has something to do with Luke. I stepped out of the meeting room and ran back to my desk, trying hard not to look at all the heads turned towards me. Gabby was on hold. When reception put her through, she was crying. Luke had had one of his fits. A short one this time, for him, just 8 minutes. But since he'd come round, the right side of his body was paralysed. This was something new. It terrified me that his fits were changing, that they might be developing in some way. I told Gabby to stay calm, that I would leave right away. When I got home, the ambulance was still parked outside, but the crew were packing away their kit. He's okay, one of the ambulance men said as I ran up the drive. Luke's paralysis had lasted 15 minutes after the seizure had finished, but now he was moving normally again, except for a limpness at the edge of his mouth that made him slur his words. The ambulance man said this happens sometimes, so we needn't worry. I hugged Luke, burying my lips into his thick hair and kissing the side of his head, wishing that we lived in a world where kisses could fix brains. I stroked his back, hoping that maybe I could find a little reset button there, sunk into a hole, something I could prod that would let us start over, that would wipe away all the scribbles from the slate and leave it blank again. Gabby was sitting on the edge of the armchair holding her stomach. Are you okay? I asked. She nodded, taking a tissue from the sleeve of her cardigan and wiping her nose. Gabby's biggest fear was that Luke's problems weren't just a part of him, but part of the factory that had made him. What if every kid we produced together had the same design fault? The doctors had all said that the chances of it happening twice were tiny, but I don't think we'd ever be able to fully relax. I knew that long after our second kid was born, we'd both be looking out for the diagnostic signs that had seemed so innocuous at first with Luke. A letter came home from school banning Tamagotchis. Another 3 kids' Tamagotchis had died and could not be resurrected. People are blanking me when I drop Luke off in the morning, Gabby said. The situation had gone too far, and Mimu would have to go. I couldn't just throw Mimu away. Luke would never forgive me for that. It might become one of those formative moments, something that will forever warp him and give him all kinds of trust issues in later life. Instead, I planned to euthanize Mimu. If I locked Mimu in the medicine cabinet, taking away the things that were helping it survive, food, play, petting and the toilet, the AIDS would get stronger as it got weaker and surrounded by more of its effluents. The AIDS would win. It was tempting while Mimu was in the cabinet to sneak a peek, to watch for its final moments. But the Tamagotchi had sensors that picked up movement. It might interpret my attention as caring and gain some extra power to resist the virus destroying it. No, I had to leave it alone, despite the temptation. After 2 whole days, I could resist no longer. I was certain that Mimu must have perished by now. Luke was insistent about being there when I opened up the cabinet, and I did not have the strength for an argument. I opened the cupboard and took out the Tamagotchi. Mimu was alive. It had now lost 3 of its limbs, having just 1 arm left, which was stretched out under its head. One of its eyes had closed up to a small, unseeing dot. Its pixelated circumference was broken in places. Wide open pores through which invisible things must surely be entering and escaping. "This is ridiculous," I said. "Luke, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to throw him away." Luke snatched the Tamagotchi from me and ran to Gabby, screaming. He was shaking, his face red and sweaty. "What have you done now?" Gabby scowled at me. I held my forehead with both hands. "I give up," I said, and stomped upstairs to the bedroom. I put on the TV and watched a cookery show. There was something soothing in the way the chef was searing the tuna in the pan that let my heartbeat soften by degrees. Gabby called me from downstairs. "Can you come and get Luke in? Dinner's almost ready." I went outside in my socks. Luke was burying a football in the sandpit. "Time to come in, little man," I said. "Dinner's ready." He ignored me. "Come in, Luke," Gabby called through the open window, and at the sound of his mum's voice, Luke got up, brushed the sand from his jeans and went inside, giving me a wide berth as he ran past. A drop of rain hit the tip of my nose. The clouds above were low and heavy, the ragged kind that can take days to drain. As I turned to go inside, I noticed that Luke had left Mimu on the edge of the sandpit. I started to reach down for it, but then stopped, stood up and went inside, closing the door behind me. After dinner, it was Gabby's turn to take Luke to bed. I made tea and leaned over the back of the sofa, resting my cup on my elbows on the windowsill and inhaling the hot steam. Outside, the rain was pounding the grass, making craters in the sandpit and bouncing off of the Tamagotchi. I thought how ridiculous it was that I was feeling guilty, but out of some strange duty, I continued to watch it until the rain had washed all the light out of the sky. Thank you.